Good morning, Eastridge Chapel class. I want to welcome you to class 2 of our series entitled Felt Board Stories. In this series, we are looking at biblical stories, largely the stories that you remember from your childhood, or to use a better word, biblical accounts that we teach our kids with an eye towards application to our modern adult world. If you will recall, last week we looked at the creation story and we were reminded that despite our cultural aversion to it, patience and process were designed into our world, and we are happy when we engage with those processes. We were reminded that we're small, but God is big. And we were given a proper understanding of not only the value of rest, but also when to rest, that we rest on the heels of productivity. Today, we are moving forward in the Bible, but not very far textually. Today, we are in Genesis chapters 2 and 3. We are going to be looking this morning together at the story of Adam and Eve. Now, before I get into the text part, I want to explain for just a minute why this particular exploration is so needed in our current cultural situation. For those who do not know me, I am a marriage and family therapist. I work on the front lines of mental and relational health. And I probably don't need to tell you, but the past year has been really, really hard on marriages. Not all marriages, mind you. For some, the pandemic actually gave them more time to spend with their families, and they've capitalized on that time that they're spending together. For some, having their schedule cleared involuntarily, but having their schedules cleared and then working from home meant that they're spending more time bonding with families and bonding with spouses. That's great and wonderful. So it's not everybody. But this past year has been really hard for a number of your marriages. And I would assume that some of you watching this video kind of feel that stirring inside of you because this year has been really hard for your marriage in particular. The additional time that you spent at home hasn't been really good. It highlighted issues that either were overlooked for a long time or that you just tried to ignore, and the excess time spent together has really pushed them to the surface. Some marriages suffered massive hits to their careers or to the industry that employs them, which created debilitating financial struggles, which of course is one of the primary drivers of marital conflict and of marital divorce. Things have gotten tense, and for some, things have boiled over. For others, it felt like you had massive parts of your family life simply taken away from you. Things that you loved, that made you happy, or that made you feel connected to the outside world. And as a result, you went to one of the few places that wasn't taken away from you to find connection. You picked up your phone, and you were looking for connection to other people. You were looking for novelty. You were looking for excitement of some kind, because being in the house every day with the same group of people doing the same thing felt monotonous, but your phone was like a window to other stuff. You weren't thinking about it that way. You weren't consciously making that choice. You just know you were bored, or you were depressed, or you were sad, or whatever other word that you were feeling. And when you picked up your phone, you didn't feel quite that intense of a feeling anymore, because the phone distracted you. It gave you some place to go. And then the next thing you know, you're doing devastating things to your marriage by way of your phone. You're connecting to high school flames. You're looking at pornography. Maybe it wasn't anything big and huge like that. Maybe you weren't dropping bombs in your marriage. Maybe you were just living so much in your phone that you kind of disappeared from the existence of the people around you. Or maybe your destruction didn't come from your phone. Maybe it came from the real world. You connected to someone else. You forgot who you were and what you'd committed to, and you found yourself in a relationship that has threatened your family. I can go on and on of the potential destruction you could be feeling or could be experiencing, but the takeaway is that the last year has been really hard. It wasn't exclusive to the last year, but the last year has been really hard for a lot of relationships. But maybe you can't relate to any of that. Maybe for you, there's been no colossal destruction, but you're not really operating at maximum capacity. You don't look at the last year and think, well, we ruined our marriage, but you're not really looking to operate right now at maximum capacity. Your marriage isn't struggling because of some smoking gun type reason. but you're just feeling a bit disconnected. Or maybe you're one of those people I mentioned in the beginning, that your marriage is great and you've never been closer. Again, I'm not being sarcastic here. There are a lot of those stories out there. I've been blessed to hear some of them. We don't really talk about those ones that are doing great in crisis because we feel like they don't need to be tended to and they don't need to be ministered to. And so if they're doing great, we just say, good for you. And then we move on. We talk about all the devastation. But there are couples in our midst and couples watching this video who are probably feeling more connected to each other now than ever. There's also marriages that are teetering on the brink of destruction. And then there's everything in between. Regardless, today is a good day to give a little attention to your marriage in light of the circumstances. I tell couples all the time, and this is your first mental note for the day. I tell couples all the time, you don't have to drive your car off a bridge to total it. You just have to stop checking the oil. And I think the same thing is true for our marriages. If you stop checking the oil in your marriage, it's going to be totaled. I believe that maintenance is required. So today's felt board story is going to help you get back to the marriage that you were designed to live out. It's also going to teach us some things about human nature. And then, of course, the power of God's design for marital companionship. I'm going to tell you up front, this is going to be a two-part video. I didn't want to do that so early in this series, but we're talking marriage, and so I can't help it. I have a lot to say when we get into this particular area. So we're going to make this a two-part video. In part one, we're only going to focus on one of the personal responsibilities of marriage that we find in the story of Adam and Eve. In other words, today, we're going to look at one simple truth about us as human beings and then how it impacts our marriage. So with that said, let's dive into the content for part one. If you'll recall, either from our video last week or from your knowledge of the Bible, the earth is created in the first chapter of Genesis. Again, we covered that in last week's video. God rests at the beginning of chapter 2, and then still in the second chapter of Genesis, we get a detailed account of the creation of man. And of course, to assist us in our exploration today, I told you I was going to have my felt board every week, and I've got my felt board this week. So we are ready to continue our felt board exploration. I'm going to begin reading in verse 5. When no bush of the field was yet had in the land, and no small plant of the field had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not caused it to rain on the land, and there was no man to work the ground. And a mist was going up from the land and was watering the whole face of the ground. Then the Lord God formed the man. Hang on, I got to get my man. Formed the man of dust. There we are. From the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living creature. And the Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. So there's the garden. Our tree here is going to represent the garden, and this, of course, is going to represent God's creation of Adam, creation of man. Now, if you are looking for historical accuracy, you will notice that my Adam is wearing some sort of bearskin rug. They don't make naked flannel graph guys for some weird reason, right? It's almost like these are designed to be used in kids' classes. All right, so you get the idea. We've got the creation of man. I want to jump quickly to verse 15. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. So Adam is in the Garden of Eden. The Lord put Adam in the garden to work it and to keep it. So that's where we're going to spend our time today, is on that verse 15. This brings us to a really important truth about human nature and an important truth that we want to look at in the context of marriage. And that is, we were made to work. It is literally built into your genetics. It is a part of your design. It doesn't mean that we're all going to swing hammers or put up drywall. Spend about 30 seconds with me and you will know those are not my gifts. It's great if you can do it, but that's not the only form of productivity. That's what this verse says to me, that we were meant to be productive. That is what I get from Genesis chapter 2, verse 15. We were meant to be productive. I don't think that concept is exclusive to men, although that's the context that we get it in this verse. We are all designed to be productive. And you may say to me, wait, I thought we were talking about marriage today. We are. Stay with me. Healthy marriages don't just happen. They involve two healthy people. Healthy marriages can't exist unless the individuals within that marriage are healthy. So, if your marriage is struggling, the first place to start today is to consider what you are bringing into the relationship, what you personally are bringing into the relationship. Let me ask some questions. Are you a happy person? Are you a healthy person? Are you a spiritually healthy person? If not, then it's awfully hard to expect to get that kind of stuff out of your marriage because you're looking to pull something out of your marriage that you're not putting into it. What that means is it is completely upon your spouse. It is completely up to your spouse to bring the joy into the relationship. If you are a joyless person, to find joy in your marriage, it's going to be really hard, but then you're going to be prone to blaming the marriage for why you don't feel joy. When I talk about joy, it's not just, I mean fun. I'm not talking about do you laugh every now and then on a Friday night watching a funny movie at home. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about lasting happiness and satisfaction. That is harder to get, and it involves knowing what makes us feel that way. Now, we could spend a lot of time on this conversation. What makes us feel joy? But I want to stick to the Adam and Eve story, and I want to stick to what we just looked at. Being productive is a part of that equation because we were designed to work. In other words, being productive is a part of what brings us joy. I'm going to give you a little peek into the therapeutic world for just a minute. There is a group that goes largely overlooked in the academic literature and also in the cultural conversation, but often struggles mightily with mental health, and that is retired adults. In many cases, they experience depressive symptomology. They often experience it severely when they do, but they keep it quiet. And the reason they keep it quiet is because they don't really know why they feel that way. They have everything that they need. They have a marriage they're committed to. They have kids. They have grandkids. They have a church family. So why do they feel this way? Why should I, who has all of these things, why should I feel this way? For many of those people, it's because while they do have a lot of meaningful things in their life, they only really measure work and productivity by things that over time have been taken away from them. So they don't really know what to do. They feel like they're not productive. It doesn't mean they are, but they feel like they're not productive. And for those people, I encourage you to find new ways to define the word productive. What does it mean to be productive for the kingdom? To be productive for your family, for your community, for your church, and then take action. So we want to understand what the word productive even means. If we go to a basic cultural understanding of the word productive, we're going to be looking at status. We're going to be looking at money, things we've purchased, our standing in the neighborhood, our standing in the culture. That's generally how the culture defines productivity, but that's not how we want to define it in the kingdom. So again, find ways to be productive. What does it mean to be productive in the kingdom? Your family, your community, your church, and then take action. If you are hearing my voice and you are in this age group that largely goes overlooked, I want to encourage you to do exactly what we're talking about this morning and finding ways to be productive. How can you, after all this time, find new ways to be productive in your life? The people who can answer that question don't tend to struggle nearly as much in the retirement years. So I want to step away now from the retirement age conversation. This concept is true for all of us. A person who doesn't feel productive does not feel whole. And a person who doesn't feel whole is going to take the joy out of an awful lot of your married life. An unhappy person is really hard to make a happy home with. There is a direct correlation between depressive symptoms and a lack of productivity in your life. Let me say that another way. Those who live feeling unproductive are far more likely to experience depressive symptoms. So the questions we want to explore to help add some productivities, the questions we want to explore to help you tend to you in the hopes of tending to your marriage are, how do you bring value to the people and to the world around you? I'm going to ask that question again because we're going to do something with it. How do you bring value to the people and to the world around you? It is a question I want you to ponder for just a moment. How do you bring value to the people and to the world around you? If you have extensive answers to that question, if you have lots of different ways that you could go with your answer, and so you're trying to pick which way do you really go first, you are probably a happy and fairly stable person. If you don't know how to answer that question, how do I bring value into the world around me? I don't know the answer to that question. If you don't know the answer to that question, you have probably struggled with feeling lost, and you've probably struggled with depressive symptoms. If you can answer that question, but you aren't really sure whether you're right or not, if you have little or no confidence in your answer, so how do you bring value into the world? If you have no answer or very little confidence in your answer, if you think you know what it is, but you're not real solid about it, then you've probably struggled with anxiety. That's how important it is that we feel as people like we are bringing value into the world. Now, I want to be very clear. Value and productivity look different for each of us. Don't waste your time measuring yourself as compared to others. That doesn't help. If you measure a fish by his ability to climb a tree, he's always going to feel like a failure. Value and productivity need to be defined by each of us. In the world, it looks like it does in the church. In our world, it looks like it does in the church. How we define value looks like it does in the church. In other words, we all have different gifts. We have that conversation as it relates to the church family, that we all have different gifts and that they all fit together. It's true beyond the church walls as well. You have unique gifting that allows you to offer value to the world that's going to make it a fruitless effort to compare you with the person next to you. Your goal here isn't to figure out how other people define value. We do that sometimes. We look at the world around us and we try to find examples of how other people define value, and then we chase that. Well, they look happy, I'm going to do what they do. That guy looks successful, I'm going to do what he does. The problem is that's what the culture and what the world does. That's what social media does. Your job is not to listen to what the culture defines as valuable. It's to listen to what God tells us about value and then to figure out how to use it. I'm going to give you a quick example. My wife is not a big reader. But often we as human beings tend to define spirituality and spiritual value by how much time you spend reading and studying and journaling. Don't get me wrong, reading and studying are important parts of understanding the will of God. But not everybody's designed to be like a theologian who dives deep on a textual analysis. That's just not everybody's gift. And so at times, people who don't have that specific gift, the gift of being deep readers, they oftentimes undercut their own value to the kingdom. They don't feel like they're as valuable. They don't feel like they have as much to offer. And when my wife undercuts her value to the kingdom because she doesn't feel like she's a big reader, she's better about it than she thinks she is. But because she doesn't feel like she's a big reader, I like to read James 1:27 to her. If you are not a huge reader, let's read James 1 verse 27 together. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction and to keep oneself unstained from the world. That is value. And that is how God has chosen to bless my wife. I imagine there are some of you watching this video who feel the same way. Well, I have a heart for people. I check on people. I try to do my best to ensure that people are supported. There's value. There's value in that because that is also not everybody's gifting. My wife's heart responds to people in need. She never needs to feel less valuable because she doesn't do what other people do. For those of you watching this video, your goal is not to do what I do. for the kingdom. Your goal is not to do what your spouse does for the kingdom. Your goal is not to do what your neighbors do for the kingdom, what everyone else around you. Your goal is to figure out what your gifting is. What value do you bring to the kingdom, to the world, to your family, and then engage with that. All right, so a question that we have to consider is, what does God say about value and productivity, and how have I been gifted in ways that allow me to be productive? I didn't want to leave this conversation as this nebulous floating idea, conceptual idea. So I wanted to help you figure out for yourself what your gifting is and how you can be productive. So I'm going to put some questions on the screen. When you see them, I'm going to explain them quickly and then pause me. And if you're alone, consider these questions. And if you're with family, then discuss these questions. Okay, there they are. The first is, how do you define productivity in your life? We've just covered this to help you understand what it looks like for you, how you really connect to productivity. I want you to describe a time when you felt like you were really productive. Really go into these memories. That can help you figure out what you connect with and what you don't. I gave you in bullet point 3, what are some verses that help us understand what God values in us? I gave some examples on the screen in front of you. You may have more. This is a great place to start. If you don't know what your answer to these questions are, if you don't, what does the Bible say about value? Okay, you've got your assignment for the week. Your assignment is to really do some personal exploration on how God defines value to the kingdom, and especially how God defines value to the kingdom in ways that connect to your personal gifting. And that's what our last few questions are rooted in. What gifts has God given you? What value do you bring? What value do you bring to the world around you? You get the idea. I want to close with this idea. You were made to work. You were made to be productive. That's just our first takeaway from the Adam and Eve story. It's also where we're going to stop. I want to encourage you today to truly consider value and productivity this week. Think about how it applies to you personally and also how it looks in your marriage. Two people who both feel that they are productive and who both agree that they're productive have an important framework for a happy marriage. If one, or even worse, both people within the marriage feel unproductive, either because they are or because they can't figure out how to define productivity in a way that creates joy, the marriage is going to suffer. We've got a lot more to discuss in this part of Genesis, but that's all for today. I hope to see you again next time.